freely dream and be judged from within. Hunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history.
All right, and welcome back to At the Roundtable, Mammill. We want to thank our sponsor, Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. Dr. Bradley, I know you've been over there. I know you've got a lot on your mind here, but a lot, our schools are really driving a lot of the violence in our city in and out of the schools. And that's the thing that I think folks don't get connected, is that if we don't get their behavior under control in the schools and then they go out and exhibit it outside of that they feel like they're insulating these kids from any type of authority figures and also any type of accountability. And I think with this setting these kids up for failure.
Well, as I'm listening to the conversation, I do have some personal issues I have to deal with involving my dog. Yeah. But as I listen to the conversation, I'm thinking to myself, we're dealing with a future here, or I should say a lack thereof. Education is it's the equalizer. Mm-hmm. And if we're producing a group of people who are not educated, what does that mean for our culture, for our people? You know what I mean? And so it put us in a situation where those kids who are now in a position to produce kids are not in a position to take care of those kids, meaning that those kids now become awards of the state or become a criminal, introduced to the criminal justice system, not having enough chance in life. So there's greater future impacts that will have on people who are not even here yet. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
No.
So this is a serious situation. Well, we're talking about the here and now, and I'm thinking of, my God, what about the future? How about the people that these people are going to produce? What can they do for those individuals? Who's going to be taking care of those individuals? And what would come out of that?
But
type of situation
is what's being done now. I think Jamal said it. Is the definition of insanity. I think what is being done now, in my opinion, is preparing these kids more for the pipeline to prison than anything that law enforcement is doing by reacting and doing their job when crimes are committed and we're called to try to do something about them. Allowing these kids to just age out into the system where, okay, we can't touch you now, but once you get to a certain age, once you turn 13, now you're in the system for something you've been getting away with because we didn't get it checked in your younger years.
Right, I agree with that. But improvement in culture is usually evolutionary. It's not revolutionary. It's usually is a generational thing. So when this think about the generations of those parents who produced this generation. And I think one of the guys said the parents don't know how to parent. Well, what do you think going to happen in the next few generations? Right. You know what I mean? So what it all equates to, our culture, our people are not moving forward because of the lack of education, because that is the equalizer. Yeah. So when you're taking that equalizer away, you become, dependent upon someone who doesn't really want you to be here anyway.
Right.
It's a sad commentary.
Well, let's bring our folks back in. On the line, we have Dave Searles from SOS Save Our Schools and Jamal Crawford. We've been having a very spirited and actually, we're connecting here now. Jamal is saying, "Hey, look, I want to be part of the solution," as he always does. And Dave is saying, I embrace that because I didn't get into this for any type of notoriety for myself. He got into it, and I honestly believe him because he's passionate about the community. He lives in the East Boston area, but he sees the problem that's impacted on this side, and he wants to help.
Well, one of the things that I picked up, although I was actually doing what I need to do with my family, was that when Jamal, I wouldn't say attack him, when Jamal shared his discontent, his belief about what the clergy not being a part of it, he was not defensive. He was like, okay, what can we do better?
Exactly.
That is the attitude of an individual who wants to move forward.
And that's why
not about
Jamal
me, it's about the issue.
Say, hey, how can I work with you? Because I see you're not just trying to defend this
Yes.
group that you belong to, you're willing to work.
Yeah, that really struck me as someone who's been very genuine, who wants to get the job done.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, how do we make that happen? Because we're losing a generation. And I know I grew up, like I said, during busing, and my mom did not give up on me in my community. It did take that village, because every day was a fight, literally.
Yeah, for me too.
To get into the classrooms, and that's not even an issue today.
Well,
and it was probably more learning going on back then during all of that turmoil than there is today.
Dr. Bradley didn't become Dr. Bradley because he was good. Because someone made me that way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm telling you.
So,
Well,
Dave, go ahead.
let me. Yeah, just a thought. I appreciate the idea of it's, and that's a great phrase. It's not change is not revolutionary. Often it's evolutionary. So it happens over time, right? So I heard this great saying some time ago. It said. It asked the question, when is the best time to plant a tree? And the answer was 20 years ago.
Yes.
When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today.
Yeah.
So it suggests that, if you wanted a tree, you should have done it. You should have done something 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
But since you didn't, now's the time to act, to prepare for 20 years down the road. And I think that helps me in terms of the work. So what we're talking about is intervening now. In a way, if we're able to do it and have the deeper conversations across the city and break down some of the barriers that are existing where agencies, organizations, institutions are working in silos, that if we were able to do that and come up with a strategic plan to intervene in young people's lives in school around school safety, we could in 20 years possibly see a reduction not only in the issues happening in school, but then the issues that would be happening in the community. We would be seeing some kids being turned around, so to speak. Better strategies across a whole range of things. So I see that as some of our work, and important work. To Jamal, I was just going to say this one comment. If I have cancer and I go to the doctor, I don't need the doctor to have had cancer to address my issues around my health care. And so I would just caution Jamal, and he's making some good points. We need some folks who are in the know and experientially what's been going on in the streets. We need that connection. Yeah. But let's not exclude people who haven't had that to also being a part of the solution and being a help. We need people across the board.
I would agree wholeheartedly with those comments, as well as with Dr. Bradley's comments as well. But I got to bring in the political side of this too, because Jamal and Dave and Dr. Bradley, it's an election year for our city councilors, and these are the ones who all I see them doing is voting themselves nice hefty pay raises, and I'm being told that if the next raise kicks in after this, their salaries will be somewhere near $150,000 a year, more than teachers are making, more than police officers are making, more than most city employees are making who are actually doing the work, right? How do we hold folks accountable who we're paying to do so, who are charged with these committees on education, on public safety, and yet it seems like they're failing in all of those categories? Jamal, I want to throw it at you.
Well, obviously, it's the voting thing, but it's, once again, kind of what I said with the parents. We have parents who are disengaged, we have voters who are disengaged, what have you, and it reminds me of pizza joints. How many pizza joints are there in Boston?
Yeah,
God knows. Yeah, but you drive around, everyone says, best pizza in town. Now, somebody lying.
Okay. Right? You're a trip.
But you think about it. So everybody's saying, I'm the best. I love the community. I do the work. I'm for the people. Whatever. And then, see, is what's the Bible say? By their fruit you shall know them. So, to me, I try to look at the end result. And if the end result ain't resulting, then, it's a moot point. And so that's really, to me, what I'm looking at. The reason that some of these elected officials survive, it's only due to our own lack of concern.
Yeah.
And to some points before, I just want to clear this up, because I don't want to give people the sense that I'm anti-clergy. After all, we are on Boston Praise Radio and TV, right? So one of my favorite guys, Pastor Bruce Wall. But the reason is because he's different, right? He's not out there, with the Mercedes Benz and a pinky ring
drives a Toyota,
right? And he only has one wife, and things like this, But what I'm talking about is, and I use those jokes, but in our community, a lot of the clergy has lost respect because people are not blind. Yeah. People see the shenanigans. Yeah. And around the time with the Boston Miracle, the other thing that happened, remember George Bush opened up the faith-based initiatives? Mm-hmm. People realized, there's gold in them down hills?
Right.
So it changed the trajectory. And I'm not saying all clergy are bad. I'm saying that many of the ones who have been in the forefront have ulterior motivations. Yeah. And are also not qualified to do the work that they say they do, and that can be proven by the record.
Dave, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, no, we always need to be open to reform and adjustment, and clergy are need to be open to critique. Absolutely, and so that's important. These issues are big, they're deep, and it's going to take some work, and it's not pretty work. It's a lot of work behind the scenes. Right. It's not glamorous. Oh. And I don't know, for whatever reason, God has put me in the place where I've just felt the motivation. I can't get away from it.
Tell me about it. People say, why haven't you retired yet? Because I still care. I still have that compassion. And I
hear
still
a story.
I make a difference. Yeah.
I hear a story of, I'm going to get teary. Kids hauling guns into school. Come on, man.
No.
Loaded.
Yeah. No.
We're a tick away from a homicide in a school.
Well, I was just saying to
God forbid. And so this is real. Well, and it's not. Knives going into school.
Right.
It's happening every day in Boston public schools.
Okay, but and listen,
and so that's concerning. And let me go on.
Go ahead. I'll let him finish, Jamal. Then I'll let you jump in because I want to hear both sides of this.
And all the other issues that young people are dealing with. I went to a funeral recently. A 23-year-old young guy overdose, and you're sitting with the folks who are attending the funeral, who are dealing with their grief using the same kind of substances that this young man went down with, right? So they're self-medicating with drugs and alcohol to deal with their grief. And so there's a lot of work to be done across the board with our young people. And it just grieves me, and I feel like I need to be involved to make a difference.
And Jamal, before you answer that, because to that point, I was saying the other day when that shooting happened out in Colorado at the school in which this student was in a safety plan, right? Because he had a propensity of bringing weapons into the school, and then he confronted the staff there and he shot two of them, and looks like apparently in some way he took his own life the following day after he had escaped. That they think Boston is immune from those type of situations happening here. And what I'm seeing with the weapons that are coming out of these schools, we're just one incident away. We've had shootings and stabbings at the schools. We've had a student murdered in front of the school. And I think it's almost like if it doesn't happen in the building, that we have 13-year-old murdered on a Sunday morning who is a student. And just because he lived in a different city, he grew up in Boston. We kind of try to find a way of saying it's not our problem here in the city. Jamal, go ahead. It is frustrating. Go ahead.
It's frustrating and it's alarming. And all I'm trying to let you know is like that. That's my childhood. I'm the tree 20 years ago. So, well, more than that now. So born in 71. In 1986, I'm in Mario Umana, Harbor School of Science and Technology, which now is for little kids. But back when I was there, it was a magnet high school, okay? And we had kids from all over. And me at that time living in Roxbury, I was never going to meet a kid from East Boston or over here and over there. And let me tell you, the shenanigans that we were up to was we found out, oh, this guy in Hyde Park, he got better coke than us. He became the coke connection. Oh, my brother over here in South End and Lennox, he got more guns. He became the gun connection. So what you're talking about, kids in school with guns now, I just don't want anybody to think that this is somehow a new phenomenon.
No,
okay?
And let me jump into what you said, because when you guys said about the tree planted 20 years ago, it's almost like we could have forecast this, because we saw this decline in the learning and all of this accessibilities, like we're recently seeing, right, with all of the new dispensaries in the city. We're seeing young people having access to edibles and things of that nature, right? I'm not saying at any particular dispensary, but somehow they're able, just like the kid who used to hang out front of the liquor store and try to find an adult that will buy it for them, right? Yep. We're seeing now this alarming number of young people who are getting access, and actually they're getting some really bad effects from this stuff because their system is not designed to process this. That's why they have an age limit. So I guess what I'm saying is that we're seeing the fruits of that tree now early on, in that if we're having kids who are digesting edibles at 8 and 9 and 10 years old, where are they going to be in 10 years? And that 20-year trajectory of that tree, that this tree has already started to bear fruit of behavior that is not appropriate, gentlemen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's good point. Okay. I made the joke about, the preacher from the 70s or whatever, and his last experience was a Saturday Night Special. When I was a kid that, and hip-hop was promoting it, my 9mm goes bang. So it's no wonder everybody wants 9mm and Uzis and my Mossberg pump. So those were the guns of the day. Well, now it's different. Yeah. The guns got better and, more deadly and dangerous.
Yeah, we have ghost guns now. Right?
Yeah, and now we have ghost guns. Back in the day, we were lucky if we had something with 15. If you got the 15 clip, you know what I mean? But then now you got the ones with the 100 in the drum and all this type of thing. And the same thing with the drugs. Nobody back then in our black community, a lot of the things, no offense, the crazy stuff we looked at, that's white boy drugs. Like taking pills. Yeah, and all that, like taking pills and all, like, sniffing and snorting and crushing up pills. Nobody was into that. Now, it's normal. And the rappers, they're drinking lean and the syrup. And now there's this new thing that's an animal tranquilizer out. And, so it's God knows in another 20 years, these kids are probably going to be all on synthetic drugs.
That's what I'm talking. Well, I mean, if you think about what you just said, Jamal, because when I went to school, all of these special needs kids, it was a little station wagon or a little bus that drove up with about 5 or 6 kids, and they looked like they had Down syndrome or something of that nature, and everyone looked out for them, right? Now everyone has an IEP. A lot of people, unfortunately, they see it as another way of getting a check from the government using their kids, but usually you have to get them medicated to expedite getting them this check. I'm like, so all of a sudden, all of our kids have learning disabilities. All of our kids now need to be medicated. Why didn't we need medication? Because during busing, I probably could have used some medication. But why is it now that because this has become some way a money maker, we're seeing more of that than
it's the same thing as the faith-based initiative, because there's gold in them nowadays. Yeah. Now it's about medicating the kids, getting them plugged in. Hey, kid, what's your insurance? Yeah, we're gonna set you up with some sessions. Now, not to say that some of these kids are in need of help, whether that is counseling, medication, stress and yoga, whatever it is. There's certain amounts of these kids are in need of something. But yes, because there has now been an industry created that deals with this, and people realize that there's money in it. Now they exacerbate it. This is what happened with the nonprofit industrial complex. Violence, inner city poverty. Oh, yes, I now have a new nonprofit, Stop the Poverty, or whatever it is. You see, and because a lot of these people, once again, were not trained in these specific areas or do not have the proper community connections, or just see it as a vehicle for them to enrich themselves or raise their social profile, these are the reasons we're in the condition we are, and probably will remain in it.
Wow, gentlemen, I'm feeling hopeless but hopeful, and I know they probably don't sound like the same because I'm looking at this, and when you guys said about that 20-year trajectory about training and training, I'm looking back and like, okay, I've seen where that tree that was planted back then, it sprouted, but we're having a lot of problems with the fruit that we're getting from it. Dave, I know I don't want to tie up your morning anymore. Any parting words before we let you go? Jamal, I want you to stand by because I want to get your take on this redistricting, but that's what we want to.
No, good. It's good to talk with Jamal and engage
I will
in
definitely
the conversation
pass
with
his
everybody here. So appreciate that.
No.
Yeah. So Jamal, I think Jamal's highlighting, and I think rightly so, that when he was in school, there should have been an intervention in the system to the extent that 20 years later we would see a difference. But there wasn't, and so we're seeing the resulting advancement of the kinds of, he's suggesting, the kinds of drugs that were being used there, and the violence evident has just advanced in a new way, in a different way, and we haven't intervened at the root.
Right.
And so I appreciate his viewpoint and
I will definitely.
So thank you.
I will definitely.
And I look forward to another time at some point.
Listen,
so
we're going to make this a monthly segment for you. But thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Great.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Great to be with all of you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
But
okay,
Jamal,
God bless everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye now.
But I mean, Jamal, you're right, because I think like for the indicator for me is when crack came to town, right? I'm like, I saw it destroy so many people who never even touched a cigarette, let alone even marijuana, but crack really came here and it hit this community hard. It was affordable and it's destructive, and we didn't say, okay, what's the forecast for these people 20 years later? And I'm seeing a lot of them, my friends that I went to school with and whatnot, that had promising careers, promising lives destroyed.
How did they get here? How did they get here, though?
Remember the term crack babies?
Yes.
Okay, so now let's stretch that term to not only people who were actually, like born of a pregnant mother who was actively addicted on crack and then gave birth, because that's the standard definition, right? Mm-hmm. But let's also say that you was a kid, you was already born. You might have been 4 years old when your mama got hooked on crack.
Right.
You still a crack baby in terms of you was a baby raised in the crack house environment. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And now some of those kids are now some of these parents there. Some of them are grandparents now. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so when we talk about, this generation of like what couldn't parent or hasn't learned parenting, I think once again, my generation, my father and them, they were caught up in the, Superfly era. And like, being with a family, like, you can't tie me down. I'm a Rolling Stone. I'm a player from the Himalayas, and all that type of thing. Family was kind of square at that time for some people, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, man, so that's my time.
We've gone through these eras, and not to say that everybody was on that. There's people who resisted. There were great solid families in the 70s. There's great solid families now. There were great solid families in the crack era.
Yeah.
But those who fell and succumbed to that cast a large shadow on society, and it's the root of some of the problems that we still have to deal with, like the gang violence with these families who've been beefing from projects for 20, 30 years. These kids ain't 20, 30 years old.
Right. Hey, Jamal, I want to pivot here for a second because I want to get your take, and I want to spend a little time on this battle brewing in redistricting. This is a story that's been getting a lot of attention, but not as much in our community. Right? The story for Yahweh Mueller. According to the plaintiffs suing the Boston City Council over the redistricting map, the body violated the Voting Rights Act of 1965 by taking race into account in redrawing district lines. Lining up in support of the lawsuit are who's who of Irish American elected officials representing South Boston and Dorchester: Congressman Steve Lynch, State Senator Nick Collins, and the city's 4 Irish American city councilors. On the other side are the defendants, the city council and the city of Boston, and a collection of civil rights organizations that have signed on to an amicus brief rejecting the plaintiffs' assertions of rights violations. The plaintiffs are permissibly attempting to upend a legitimate legislative process because they did not achieve their desired outcome, the amicus brief reads. So here we go, right? We're battling over the lines here and how who's going to be representing folks. in the upcoming election with this happens all the time. The Republicans just did this masterfully in redistricting, right? And so we have less representation of our folks. And now there's a battle here. Folks are saying that, it didn't achieve the racial lines that folks want to hear. So you have this division, it looks like on the surface, of black against white.
Well, this is a very sticky wicket.
Okay.
And ultimately, it's actually good that it's going to court, even though, it's an ugly thing, because ultimately this is what courts are for.
Yeah.
The courts will decide, and, hopefully they get a judge that is right-minded and.
But do you see, not to cut you off, do you see something like this? Because, this is what I'm saying is that because the Republicans, Mitch McConnell and that, when stacking the courts in the Supreme Court now, because that's where ultimately I think something of this magnitude would get to because of all the redistricting cases that have been in the federal courts, right? That if it reaches there, they've already said they're giving these Republicans or folks on this side priority in allowing their way of thinking other than what might benefit us.
So to me, this is one of those issues where it clearly illustrates, Republican, Republican, Democrat, Schmemocrat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, these people who have their own survival mode, self-preservation, that often it comes down on racial or demographic or economic lines. We see this sometimes, because even, let's say it could be an entirely white community, but the rich white people I don't want them poor white people living next to me or, lumped with me. We don't share the same views and ideals, so it doesn't matter. It can go along class lines, it can go along racial lines or whatever. In this case, of course, they're alleging and asserting that, the Voting Rights Act was misused and violated, and it violated the rights of the white voting citizens. And, hey, good luck with that. I'm sure they have big lawyers. They're spending big money in this already.
Right.
Big money has been dumped into this.
Right.
But, I don't see how a court of law would be able to uphold that foolishness.
So let me ask you and Dr. Bradley, because if I look at the demographics, and particularly in communities of color that don't vote, how is this redistricting going to help folks who, no matter what district they're in, they're not voting, right? So is it going to dilute the vote if they put these folks in a certain population, but if you already and put others in another, then that makes it a little bit more equitable? Because really the solution is if people voted, you wouldn't really need these redistricting, right? Because I'll finish and I'll let you say it. Because what I see politicians usually doing is trying to carve out people who vote in favor of what they believe in, or that actually vote, right? Because I don't want a district with non-voters. It doesn't help me.
No, redistricting has to happen every 10 years,
right?
Right, and then B, it goes by population. And so I'm going to tell you what screwed the whole game up is, them building up the seaport, right?
Yeah.
Which used to be vacant.
Yeah.
And now has thousands of people that flooded a particular district. And now that district has a bigger population than anything. So they had to shed some people. So, they have to basically carve up the seaport so that, a little bit goes over here, Dorchester, a little bit goes over here, South Boston, some of South Boston then has to get shed, so it all, quote unquote, comes down to population so that not one particular area has a larger just numbers advantage. Now, in terms of those who actually come out to vote, that's an us problem.
Yeah, there we go. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So at the end of the day, unfortunately, those that may remember, the COINTELPRO thing.
What is it called?
COINTELPRO, what the government was using against the black movement.
Okay.
One of the main points of COINTEL program, the counterintelligence program, was to prevent the rise of a black messiah. Most people stopped there, but it was really to prevent the rise of a black messiah that could then electrify the masses. So here in Boston, what we see is that certain people do well when they got that it factor. So, for instance, like I used to say back in the day, Ayanna, she chose a different career path. Our now Congresswoman Ayanna Presley. But had she decided to run for mayor back in the day, she could have won in a bathrobe and slippers.
Right, and to that point, real quickly, Jamal, Mel King did better than most that have run in this climate back then, when it wasn't expected to do as well as he did as a black man in Boston. And now we can't even get a black person elected mayor in the city of Boston.
But when we come out under a certain thing, so Mel King at that moment, in his moment in time, got electrified. He was Obama before Obama, for our local Obama. Same thing with, and still wasn't able to garner the enough masses to win, but it was a heck of a show.
But my point to that is, I'm saying he did better back then under those circumstances than folks do today.
Well, people were voting.
Right.
People were voting,
right.
and in a block, and they had less distractions and so on and so forth. So when Mel King came out, people were like, that was Black Power. This man had dashikis and overalls, and you know what I mean. So those were the days. So you came out. Now it's more diluted, but still, people, once again, those people with the it factor, the Ayannas or whatnot of the world, they for whatever reason seem to electrify the masses and so on and so forth. Now we have not had that. There are many who have run who think that they've had that, and apparently it didn't work out. But really, it's about us identifying someone who has the capacity and wants to do it. Because you also have to want to do it.
Right. But to your point about the build-up, right, because I had to work Sunday at the St. Patrick's Day, and I had stopped in that area in the seaport to grab something, and I didn't even realize, because I don't visit that area, how much it had been built up, right? And I guess I say this because there's also being a build-up in our community, in the black community, and the landscape is changing. It's predominantly non-blacks that are moving into these neighborhoods. So we're seeing folks moving into those areas that most likely, I'm sad to say, because our folks don't, that will participate in the voting process, right? So would you say that would balance out at some point, because we're seeing the influx of more white folks into black neighborhoods? We're not seeing that in the seaport, that's for sure. That's pretty much because of the price point down there.
I don't think it's going to balance out at all. I think what's happening is that you have racism being perpetuated through the economical might in the city. So it kind of strokes the ego or the value system of the people that have the money. Well, they're not saying, well, if you're black and you got the money, you can still stay. They're not, it's going to be very few of you all, because resources are not distributed in our society that way. So I don't think so. I think Jamal is right on point. Is that we typically don't vote,
right?
So we talking about the sea. I used to patrol the seaport when I was a cop back in the 1980s.
Desolate.
It was warehouses.
Right.
It was just warehouses. Right. We had Anthony Pier 4 over there. I think that was
the No Name.
Yeah, the No Name. Right. No Name. I used to love No Names though. But my point here is that you didn't have an educated populace residing in that area. Today you do. Along with business owners.
And residents,
and residents. So you have a voting population that is not replicated in other areas of the city until gentrification gets to that area.
Right.
That's really the problem. We don't vote.
Right. So, but this really, if you look at the story, Jamal and Dr. Brown, it's coming down to racial lines, and I think it's putting people in a bad light, because, to his credit, I see Senator Collins' name in there, and I know he's done a lot for, the black community. He's probably been one of the most fair politicians on the other side that I could say that I have a relationship with that has been responsive. And I don't think that his is racially motivated. I can't say that about all, but I'm saying I don't think that's with him. So how do we square this, Jamal?
Well, hold on. Well, let me tell you how it is racially motivated. Okay. It's racially motivated because this is one of the time when all the guns are pointed and they like, okay, Nick, what you gonna do?
Okay.
So racially motivated in
pick
terms
a side,
of,
you're saying.
Exactly. He can't break from the pack. That would impact severely, particularly on an issue like this. Is such a lightning rod. That would severely impact his support from that base in the future, which is let's not get it twisted, his primary base.
Mm-hmm. We don't,
you know.
Right.
Well, not even that we don't vote. We're not even in his district like that. So the fact that Nick Collins, and this is what I used to say about, I have a great relationship with Senator Jamie Eldridge, also Senator Brownsburger.
Yeah. Okay. Same. I know
I
Brownsburg.
can call the State House and get a conversation with either of those fine gentlemen, right? And try to get something done or what have you. They have no reason to even answer my call. I am so far out of there. Eldridge is Acton Boxborough.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you have some people who serve constituents even outside of their district because of the issue based or whatever, and then we have some people even who are supposed to represent us locally who don't even serve us. Nick Collins. I only bring that up to say that Nick Collins, anything that he has conversations with our community, particularly on issues that don't necessarily jibe with his main base, that's like a favor. That's like icing on the cake because he certainly does not have to do it.
Right.
We couldn't vote him out, nor could we vote him in.
Exactly.
Well, not yet. Not yet. I mean, I think he's smart, to be honest with you, because if there's a redistricting where he is representing people that look like us, now he has a foundation in that community.
Well, he does, but also I don't think because of the population that's moving into these areas, I don't think it hurts him or helps him in a way, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying that he's being cynical in
No.
I mean, I really like the guy. I think the guy has a heart. What I'm saying is that some of these individuals are sharp enough to say, I can't control the redistricting, and if that happens to the point where I am getting, representing people that look like that, I now have a foundation in that community because I have done these things, and it's easy for me to go to that community.
But Jamal, I like Jamal's point where he talked about the other folks is that, like you said, Nick Collins could do nothing and not be in jeopardy of losing his seat. And he's actually done the job. And we have people who are in neighborhoods who are supposedly represent majority people of color, and they do nothing. And a perfect example as a recent issue we've been talking about here on this broadcast, the convention center, right? And I haven't really seen a response from our elected officials or our representatives saying, hey, wait a minute, all this discrimination going on at the convention center, which is over there in the Seaport area.
Okay. Can I give you a fun fact?
Sure.
Okay, do you know the white man who works at the convention center, who is one of the plaintiffs over there talking about the discrimination? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not know.
Okay, so it's the white man. He was like a supervisor there, and he's like one of the main focal points of the case. And then, of course, it's all the black employees and Latino employees who were the actual
even the visitors from people that were saying, black people go down there spending their money.
Exactly. So when they did the story in the paper, they showed the white man, right, who's like he looks like the face of justice, the good white guy who was. Yes, there's discrimination here at the thing. Okay. Do you know he's also the lead plaintiff or one of the lead plaintiffs in this South Boston discrimination of voter rights of the white people case?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So it's funny how these types of things, you know what I mean? Okay, he looks like a champion over here, and then he looks like a villain over here. Which is it? And this is once again how these things can literally fall along economic class. Look, he could actually be fighting for the people in the convention center and say, yeah, it's wrong how these workers get treated. They make our business happen. And yeah, we need these workers. Then he could also be like, but I don't want them living next door to me.
Well, see, so Jamal and Dr. Bradley, help me out here. Because, see, again, we see a certain segment when they feel like their rights and whatever is in jeopardy, they rally. Why don't we adopt that concept? Why are we always this crab in a barrel mentality? Why aren't we seeing, like we just talked over an hour about how bad our schools are, and the population clearly reflects that it's our kids that are impacted by this, and yet there's no response from the parents in the community that they come from. So do we blame folks for saying when they see their situation in jeopardy and they're actually doing the survival of the fittest and we're just sitting on our behinds? Am I wrong here? Help me out, gentlemen.
No, we do rally and we do protest. We just do it wrongly.
Okay.
So I'll give you a great example. There's a bunch of organizations that I've been, affiliated with, who are like labor organizations or, any of the, maybe healthcare or whatever issue it is, criminal justice, whatever, the violence. And they'll ask me for advice, or I might try to help them do a flyer or a website or something. You know what peeves me is when they do a rally at the State House on a Saturday.
I know.
I'm like, you do realize it's closed.
Right.
Right? So what we need to do is, instead of rallies and protests, because let's say you can get 1,000 people out, or like Miss Monica Cannon Grant used to say, I got 55,000 people to Franklin Park. Well, if we could get 500 people to the State House, not do a rally, not do a protest, we might have a little talk outside first, rah-rah, shish, boom, bar, fire up the troops. But then you go in and you do this thing. It's a novel idea. It's called a lobby day. That's what you do. And you go inside the State House. You have your little scripts already written out. You have your little proposal already Xeroxed. And you go to every office in the State House. And you leave them a packet. Can we talk to Senator so-and-so? Hey, is Representative so-and-so here? Boom, boom, boom. And you leave them a packet. That's what you do. And I've been trying to tell people about this for the past 10, 15 years because we did it successfully with Jobs Not Jails. We did it successfully with against the, they're trying to bring 3 strikes law to Massachusetts. So we've done it successfully, but for whatever reason, a certain segment of us remain stuck on stupid and are willing to 1,000 times over do something that does not work and will not try one time something that's been proven to work.
So what I hear from Jamal, Dr. Bradley, I just might as well move to Florida because at least I know I'm getting there, right?
Well,
I'm expecting something different here. Dr.
Don't bring your books. All your books outlawed.
My contribution to your question, my response to your question would be this: we protest, and we protest well. We rally, and we rally well. We vote. We speak out loudly, and we show, and we may even damage pieces of property. But what happens afterwards?
Great point, because all of this protest, Black Lives Matter. What has been the difference in the outcome? What has been anything you can measure? Any real changes?
So, is there any strategic planning? Is there any strategic operation? And the rally is going to kick something off that's going to actually create or address the issue that we are concerned about.
And to Jamal's point, he's right on target because, like you said, think about it, right? These folks didn't just go out there on the other side and protest. They went into the legislators. They got laws changed. They put things in place to prohibit, right? They didn't just go out there marching in front. They went inside and said, this is what we want you to do, and if you don't, we're going to fire you.
We're going to fire you. And so we don't do that. We may go out and burn a couple of pieces, some tires, break glass, walk out with TVs, walk out with stereos, whatever the case may be. And I'm not, I understand the social issues that causes that to happen. I got it. All right. But what are we doing? What are we doing after the event? George Floyd is a good example. We did all those things. So now we talked about police reform. We got police reform in certain places, but not in other places.
Not a federal one.
So we still have to deal with, the federal issue. We still have to deal with a party that's refusing to even budge. So what are we doing after the protest? That is the problem.
Jamal, you got the answer?
Okay, so it's what we were doing before and during and still after. So people such as myself was just, y'all know the old saying, stay low and keep firing, right? So while all that was going on, I wasn't going to none of them protests, Black Lives Matter, whatever. I was working on police decertification, and I was working on police reform with the city. And now those things got done. And it didn't get done perfectly, but it beats a blank. It's better than what we had before, and in the future, now we can use this as a foundation to continue to build upon and get it more better for the future. But folks like me did that, but the problem is that what I do ain't sexy.
Right.
So, when I'm in a meeting working on this type of stuff, it might be 10, maybe 25 of us tops. It ain't no hundreds. It ain't no thousands. Because folks rather do the rah-rah shish boom bar. They make their posters with the little glue sticks and glitter, and you know what I mean? And they go, all this type of stuff. Even if it's like, okay, the craziness when they was like defund the police, right? Mm-hmm. Great. Have you ever seen a defund the police proposal?
No.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. So it's just y'all just gonna shout it in the air, you're yelling at the cloud. Defund the police. Great. All right. Even if that cockamamie idea,
who's gonna take the lead on it? Right. Yeah. Who's gonna take the lead?
Who's gonna put the face on it?
Right. Who's gonna take the lead? But to your point there, Jamal, I say is that we have an education gap here, and I haven't seen any, because you just made me think about things. You always got me thinking. No one has filed a lawsuit. I mean, the state is in jeopardy of taking over our school system here, and not one parent that I know of has filed a lawsuit saying you're depriving my kids of an education. What is going? You would think that would be an important issue, right? Mm-hmm. If the proof is there that someone is saying that your child is not being educated, and the law says you are guaranteed to an education.
Mm-hmm. You're paying for
it. In that regard, y'all know who you need to have on the show, and you might have had him before, but you should get him again if you have. Is Yvonne.
He's been on. I have to get him back. It's been a while. Yeah, Yvonne Espinoza from the Lawyers Committee, Civil Rights.
Because he's a lawsuit machine.
That's what I'm saying. He ain't know. Listen, he is the reason why at Mamley we were so successful. The drug hair test, promotional exams, and all of that. The display. Yvonne Espinoza and his crew down there. Definitely.
He be issuing out lawsuits like Lil Wayne be shooting money at a strip club.
That's right.
He just bow, bow, bow.
And he don't care. And not just here at hotel work. It doesn't matter. He's seeing injustice. That's his cause. You're right. But we don't have. We have one Yvonne Espinoza and his staff.
I was going to say, brother, we have a history. We have a country that has institutions that were built to not allow us in. You need multiple. You need many
multiple
Yvonnes.
Approaches. Yeah,
you need many of those individuals who are coming at this from all different directions. Because at the same time, I personally think there should be a lawsuit against actually, denying education on the CRT. I think when you take that away, you're denying my child an education about their history. Mm-hmm. I think there should be a lawsuit on that.
Well, you remember when the families at the Latin was a perfect example when they said, "Hey, my kids deserve to be in it." They filed a lawsuits, right?
Yep.
See, certain segments are willing to fight for what they believe in, and I have a problem with that. We just sit back and Jamal's point, we want someone else to do all the work.
Yeah, but the other side though, Larry, if you have the money to file these suits and you don't have the money to file, the money is more important to the individual who doesn't have it. So the lawsuit is the last thing they're going to think about. See, the thing is that community you're talking about, this goes back down to the distribution, in my opinion, the distribution of resources in our society. People are less likely to deal to offend white folks because it's perceived that they have the resources to come after you in all levels of government.
That's a great point. So Jamal, what do you see is the outcome for this redistricting? Or you see it, the plaintiffs being coming out on on the winning side, or do you think some judge is going to? Because I think this is one of the, even if the plaintiffs are not successful, there will be an appeal to the courts that they see are more favorable in the thinking, not in the law, but in the thinking.
Whatever it is, it's going to be disruptive to the overall racial, relationship of the city. And in the words of the immortal Mr. T, I will say, my prediction is pain. I think this is just going to stir. It's going to kick up a stir.
Oh man, he is ripe today, boy. I'm telling you,
that's every day. That's every day.
But yeah, I just think it's going to kick up a lot of the old ugly stuff, and kind of like the busing stuff.
Well, it seems like it's not to cut you off, Jamal. Right up. It seems like again, it's South Boston against Roxbury, right? I mean, that's where Lynch, Collins, Baker and all those folks are on that side of town, and the folks who are in opposition are on the other side of town. This almost seems like busing 2.0.
You're going right back to, remember Louise Day Hitch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're going right back to that era.
Yeah.
Just
Hey,
a
now-
different argument. Different
Hey,
issue.
and let me ask y'all a question, because I really wanted to call in on your first segment when y'all was talking about T-Rump and all
Yeah,
this.
yeah, go ahead.
What about them cops? So the one cop got fired, and then the Latino cop didn't get fired. And to me, I believe just your presence there alone, whether you went inside the Capitol or not, the fact that you went, you planned it, that was your sole purpose, and ain't like you was visiting your auntie in D.C. and decided to go there. You know, that was your sole purpose of your trip. I believe that alone speaks to a certain mind state that I believe is prohibitive to you carrying out your duty.
Well, I
agree.
But see, here's the thing. Now I'm gonna push back a little bit because I have a First Amendment right? So I can go and protest, right? And I can argue the argument that I was not there for an insurrection. I was there because I felt like the election was stolen, right? So if that mindset is delusional as it was, right, you have every right to protest. So as long as you were there peacefully protesting and you didn't enter the Capitol, because I think once you started storming it, then all bets are off. You don't have any defense for
But
that.
I would push back and say, okay, that's true. But we're talking about enforcing the law. You're in that capacity where you have to use your authority equitably and fairly against all people, regardless of what they look like. If you're subscribing to that school of thought, I can argue that you're not in a position to fairly exercise your authority.
But then you have folks who would say that the issues that you and I as president of AMLIO, right, that we shouldn't been able to bring those because of our position, that somehow it's opposing white people because we're fighting for issues that are inequality. You see what I'm saying? So I think it's a slippery slope. I'm not saying you guys don't have a valid point, but I think if we start regulating what you can and cannot protest, like we how many times have we had to protect skinheads and all that, right? They come here, they have a right to protest. I don't agree with any of that stuff, but that's the freedom.
But he was
that's
not
the-
protecting, he was participating.
correct.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. But so Larry, so forget it. Let's say you're not on duty. The skinheads are here in town.
That's right.
You're in the crowd.
That's right.
No, that's a whole different. Right? No, that's a whole different. But because these are, I get it. No, I'm not saying that there's a fine line here. I just think that one would make the argument that these folks are saying they came there because they were there because they felt like the election was stolen. We all know with the skinheads. So if you're in a group with the skinheads, you already know their reputation precedes them.
But we also know what Donald Trump's reputation and his believers' reputation
Right.
precedes them
And
as
that's
well.
why
and that is not to represent people that look
I
like you
agree,
and I.
and that's why you saw. I was watching the news where it was only one black guy that they must have paid that was sitting there, right? Because these folks know that, right?
Yeah.
This, the outcome, the outcome is going to be different,
Yeah,
right? That
exactly.
people still sitting in jail, and Donald Trump is saying, "Yeah, go ahead down there.
Yeah.
I'll be there with you."
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But even if you believe that the election is stolen, that right there is, to me, a treasonous thought. And if you are a law enforcement officer, you're basically saying, I don't believe the law worked. The system screwed up. I'm so interested in it, I'm going to drive, whatever it is, 400 miles
Yeah.
or fly to D.C. I think they drove, though.
Yeah.
To DC,
Yeah.
and so, and then what's the next step? If you believe the election is stolen, and you're going to your leader who's saying this was stolen, I think the next logical step is insurrection.
Well,
right?
see, but here's the thing, though, Jamal, and you, I think you'll, Dr. Bradley, agree. I thought Jimmy Carnell should have been fired a long time ago for his opinions in the PAC, but he was protected, right?
I agree.
And he was. I'm surprised he wasn't there at this insurrection.
He's
but
probably too old now to
But
do it.
here was
I
someone who
agree.
was allowed to serve in his capacity as a police officer because they say, "Hey, free speech," right?
Okay, now let me do something that is
Go. We got
probably
2
gonna
minutes.
cause-
I'm gonna give it. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's going to cause a rift in the universe.
Okay.
It's like this is worse than me agreeing with Dan Walker.
Okay.
What I will say about Carnell is at the time when he was like calling Obama a monkey, and I think they had a cartoon in there with Obama with monkey ears. That is different than if he had showed up at a protest against Obama in a monkey suit and all that. That's different.
Yeah,
So
agree.
if they were writing something or tweeting something I find that far more excusable than them traveling hundreds of miles to a rally where the probability of this type of thing happening, it's like nothing good was going to happen there.
Right,
They were going there because they believe America was being stolen.
Right.
And if they believe that, then they should not be officers of, as the comedian said, the god doggone law.
No, I get. So I'm just saying, like I said, I'm being devil's advocate here because there were people who went there, and once this started, they left. They didn't go. They came there to protest what they thought, whether true or not, that this was the election was stolen. But when those folks who left and didn't hang around, didn't storm the Capitol, they were exercising their rights.
Mm-hmm. And they're free today. They're free from scrutiny by the court.
So I don't think they should lose their jobs.
But we have officers who were there at the rally and then went to.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't have.
I don't need that. I don't have a problem because you are now breaking the law.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. But I'm saying just being there that day, I don't think that is, to me, would be enough for me to terminate you. I wouldn't agree with it, but
I think for an officer though,
it's hard. No,
for an officer, I would think that it would be for a regular citizen. I got it, but for a police officer, I think there's an extra layer.
But you don't give away your rights. You don't becoming a police officer. You have an opinion,
but you put yourself in a position to enforce those rights, and you enforce them fairly. So one can actually look at your presence there and your belief in that.
But do you think Jimmy Cornell was able to enforce them fairly? All looking at his writings.
Yeah, but he didn't participate in any kind of rally that actually talked about or even thought of insurrection.
Okay,
whatever happens, this was certainly history.
Yeah,
first time in the history of ever that a white man got fired and the Latino officer didn't.
I knew you'd take us out on a high note.
That's a good one. That man be blessed.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Much love to you, man. And I will see you in the AM.
Yes, sir.
All right. Take care. Folks, you've been listening at the Round Table, man. Well, our hearts and prayers are with the Bradley family during their really difficult time. I know they have a little loved one, an extended member of their family who they've got to deal with some family. So our prayers are with you, brother.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
All right. Until then, be well.
All souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst, and the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to